Anyone living in London knows who Extinction Rebellion are. People around the capital have no doubt been compromised in the last few years by the group's rebellions taking place across central London. The global activist group is incredibly divisive. You will have seen them hanging a banner above London Bridge in March, and you will of course heard of Insulate Britain, which is a branch of Extinction Rebellion which controversially blocks motorways and some roads around the capital, making some drivers and cyclists very frustrated. Well, Extinction Rebellion are calling for urgent action to be taken to fight the climate crisis, and more than what the government is currently proposing. Well, the group have just announced a 2022 rebellion throughout the capital, taking place in September. Now, their aim is to entice more people to get involved in the movement and hold the government to account. Well, the government have committed to their net zero target, decarbonising all sectors of the UK's economy to meet net zero by 2050. This, however, doesn't come without scrutiny, as many people are claiming this will not be met, and this target isn't enough for Extinction Rebellion either. So what are they calling for, and what would stop them protesting around the capital? Well, I interviewed someone from the press team within Extinction Rebellion, and here's what she told me.
In terms of what we're asking for when we're out on the streets, Extinction Rebellion's always existed to create the political space for change to happen. So we don't want to say how the climate crisis should be addressed, just that it is urgent and it needs addressing. And we are actually asking for the government to create and be led by a citizens' assembly. So that's like a representative sample of the people of the UK. About 100 people come together in a room, hear from experts and deliberate. So they bring their expertise in their everyday lives. You know, what's it like being a disabled person living in Woking who depends on public transport, and the experts bring their understanding of the crisis and the potential solutions. And that gives the government a mandate, basically, to do the things that are necessary to address this crisis, which has become very extreme because it's been neglected for so many decades. We also have an immediate demand, which we were out on the streets with in April, which is to end all new investment in fossil fuels immediately. And that's not radical by any means. It's what the International Energy Agency are asking for, and they're, you know, a kind of international governance body. They're not activists. So I don't think this government will make those changes until they're forced to, but they are subject to public opinion. And so if enough people decide to make a stand, then you know, it's our democracy. We can push those changes to happen.
What do you say to people who, and there are lots of people out there, who get really quite upset by your disruptions, especially in the capital city? You know, people say there are other ways of going about this and other ways of performing activism.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, I think. Lots of people who are part of Extinction Rebellion are here because their day was disrupted and they didn't have the information about how serious the climate crisis is. And that's kind of on the shoulders of our government and media, that isn't being communicated to people. You know, we might be told about 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, but we're not given the information about what the implications of that are for ourselves, our children, our food supplies, our security. And there's an interesting story recently about Sherilyn, the Range Rover mum, who kind of drove into Insulate Britain protesters, and they've had conversations since and had a very amicable interview on This Morning the other day. So I think people may be upset in the moment. We don't go out there to upset people, but we are willing for that to happen in order for the message to get across, because it quite clearly is urgent and necessary. And, you know, in terms of other ways to protest, we haven't made these choices randomly. They're based on historical research. Basically, we know that disruptive protest is what works, and so that's what we do. You know, it's how we got the vote, it's how women got the vote, it's how we got weekends. It's kind of interwoven in our history that is how change happens.
Well, I reached out to multiple people within Number 10, including the Environmental Minister, none of who got back to me about doing an interview or telling us more about their net zero target. So what do you guys think? Do you think this is a fair way of protesting, or have you been disrupted by them in the past? Let us know in the comments below.